Welcome to the Strangers on the Way podcast. I'm so excited to have today's guest, who is literally an expert on play and exploration with us. I met Dave through my friend Tracy just a number of months ago and was so excited to start to do some kind of work with him and discovery with him. And after some of our meetings, I was just saying to him, was on the ground crying because I was overwhelmed with the goodness and the magnitude and the beauty of God. So I'm so excited to our listeners to have just such a treat to have Dave Bindewald with us today. Dave, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Lauren. Thanks for having me. It's great to
Yeah,
be here.
so excited to have you. Well, I'd love to jump right in. You have such a neat story. You've created the Center for Play and Exploration. Could you share a bit about that journey, what led you there, um, and just yeah, how it unfolded?
Sure, absolutely. It started very internally and personally. I think for other reasons. I mean, I've always had sort of a, what, latent or buried curiosity about what became the center. I realize now it was kind of marinating and stewing for a while. So I'm pretty sure indirectly or not terribly apparently to me that was going on, but I was, for whatever reason of that day, I was doing some study, maybe for other work, on the beginning of the biblical story of the creation account. And I got hung up, arrested sort of on goodness and a particular kind of goodness. And this is probably 12, 15 years ago or so. So I was an adult, and I had seen some things, and like all of us have been through some harder stuff. And, I'd grown up and matured, and my innocence was sort of, naivete was gone. And I read this idea. I heard the scriptures say, I heard God say, the world is good, and it's good, and it's good, and it's good, and this is good, and that's good, and this part is good. And I noticed that I was getting angry and I was getting offended because I kept realizing that I was feeling, no, it's not. No, it's not. Maybe it used to be, but it's not. So this is kind of simmering. And then I get to the end of Genesis 1, and it was almost like to spite me, or a turning of the knife, if you will. And it says, God looked at everything God made, and it was very good. And I almost like threw the Bible. I was just like, this is ridiculous. Like, settle down. Like, this is inappropriate. So, long story made short, which I'm happy to talk more about, just, guide as you will, or what you think people would be interested in. But that's kind of the moment that it started, with me throwing the Bible across the room in anger. And for the next couple hours, and now I guess sitting here today, I know better to say for the next 15 years, I have, part of me has set out to see if that's true or not. And I was angry. I was offended that anyone, let alone God or this, hallowed launching book, would say something like, what's most true about the world? What I'm going to say on the first page is, it's not just okay, but every part of every inch of the cosmos is good, and it's very good. Our Jewish scholar brothers and sisters have helped with translating that word very. I guess we can just go there real quick. A better translation of Genesis 1:31, where it says very good, is excessive. God saw that everything God made was excessively good. It was abundantly good. It was forcefully good. And my personal favorite, again, the one that then it made me the most angry, but unnecessarily. it's gooder than it needs to be. And I was I was troubled, to say the least. And over the next couple hours of that day bleeding into the next day, as I started to see things about this world of ours and what that directly was saying about the creator of this world of ours, my anger turned to shock, which turned to awe, which turned to giddiness, which turned to just tears, which turned to hilarity. It is too much. It's too much. And that's the most wonderful thing I've ever heard. And it quickly became not just an idea. The center developed over those years to help other people, not with a new teaching. Just think about what we're saying here. This is maybe the most old thing we can say. That this is, and just leaving it out there, you can plumb deeper if you like, but just the idea that the most true thing about the world today in November of 2024 is its goodness, and a certain kind, like excessive, indestructible, unnecessary. That's a controversial thing to say. And maybe as a tease, the center has set that hook forever in my heart and in my mouth, and it wrecked me. It's messed up a lot of things in the most good way. So that's
What
kind
did
of the
that
flyover.
I'd love to dig in a little deeper, like what shifted? Because I know, like, as you go into like midlife, you do like you get the deaths and the sicknesses and the trials and the tragedies, like, and the news, and it looks like the story saying it's the opposite, and the
Yeah.
pain in our own heart. Like, what shifted you from being angry to being like, oh my God, goodness?
Yep. Yep. I think part of it is an ordering, like getting the beginning right, because I think I had accidentally, totally just, understandably, accidentally, it wasn't an evil, manipulative, intentional slight I was creating. I just lived a while and I had forgotten, and I mixed up the beginning, and I thought the most true thing as far as a Christian understanding of the world or theologically or whatever was brokenness, right? Like what's most true is sinfulness and the fall. And I just forgot that that's not how the story starts. So the first thing that changed was I got the beginning right, or I got the beginning more right than I had been. And I mean, you talk about something that launches encyclopedias or hours and hours of delight. If it is more true, if goodness is more true than evil, now we're talking. Like that's a different reality, right? And so and more specifically, you mentioned all the awful things that we've seen, so children in war, it's happening right now. And awful things that happen to our bodies, whether disease or injury or murder or something physically that assault, abuse. The question across all levels of suffering is which is more powerful? Which one, if you'll forgive the simplicity of this, which one wins? In other words, is it possible that a child in war can have every ounce and atom of innocence and childlike delight eradicated from them forever? Is it possible that a disease could destroy a body so much so that that body is gone forever? And I now know that that is not true. That if this stuff is true about goodness, it's impossible for evil or sinfulness or broken or malintent or fill in the blank there, aggression, abuse, disease, all it can do is pervert or mess with or tamper with a core, an original goodness. And it turns out, thanks be to God, that thing is indestructible. I mean, maybe most dramatically, resurrection, right? Like, is it possible for my body to be so maligned and destroyed, disease-riddled, abused, that this good creator that we're bumping into sort of throws up their hands and says, well, I tried. That's hogwash. That it's not going to win. It can't. So maybe it's just as those examples. When is the first time? When the center started, we were having conversations with folks about Syria at the kickoff to this cohort we were doing. It just so happened that the launch night of this first cohort, Syria was being bombed, and there were images of children dealing with that.
Wow.
And the question came up, how long is it before the first child in Syria does the first childlike thing after this bombing? And you talk about a controversial sort of, we felt inappropriate sitting in our restaurant talking about it, but I think we sort of were realizing this is where this hits the ground. And no one, the longer we talked, we realized, well, it's not never. When's the first time that someone throws something at something or kicks something or tells a joke again? And this is like, this is very sort of a superficial example, but I stand by it and invite and challenge us and your listeners to take this as deep as it'll go. Because I now believe, I'm convinced, you can't go below this. If you dig deep enough, do you hit evil or do you hit good? And the Christian story says you hit good. And it just blew everything apart for me.
Wow. Wow. That's so powerful. I remember being in a session with you, and all these light bulbs, I feel like every time go off, and I think we said something like, oh, like this remembrance of play and childlikeness and joy, like it was being uncovered. And the past, obviously, like the past few years for everyone, I feel like have been quite traumatic. But I felt like this, oh my goodness, I remember this feeling. And I, like, where did it go? And you'd said, like, we just forget, but it can be uncovered. Could you talk more about that?
Yeah, happily. Yeah, maybe a practical way to talk about what we were just mentioning of it's the most deep and most true thing. It's so, please, evil and brokenness and sin and suffering are real, but there's a deeper reality. And I think this remembering language is really helpful there, right? It's not we're not going to create something new and kind of superimpose it on top of this like sad, broken thing. Turns out the glorious, delightful, playful is rock bottom. And so if you dig deep enough, you hit it. So remembering, maybe in sort of these childlike terms, it's so interesting. Another key moment was when Jesus says to adults, you have to change and become like a child. And interestingly enough, he was talking to church leaders at the time. So I think there's a encyclopedia there, or a dissertation or two there for anyone who's interested. But what a classic sort of Jesus thing to say, right? Just sort of say a sentence like that and walk away. Be like, what in the? So certainly there are volumes of what that could mean and probably does mean, but at the center, we've kind of zeroed in on, maybe there are favorites, but we also feel like it's the most recoverable, the most quickly, and it's teachable, it's trainable, and that is curiosity, divergent thinking, and a freedom to fail. So children, as it turns out, are literal geniuses in all of those skills. And the question is, I think the question in yours of remembering this and getting back to this just begs the question, I mean, do we grow out of those things? Like, do we develop out of them as we get older? Because if we do, we should just close the center and go, oh, like, there's another better way to do this. But I mean, thanks be to God, it's not true. It's not a it's not a card you hand in when you turn 18. Like, and you know this, like as we've talked, and I would challenge anybody listening to: is there nothing that you're not curious about? Is there anything that there's one thing? Like it never kind of gets knocked out of us, and this what's being recalled or recovered there, I think that's a perspective, right? Curiosity is a perspective. It's sort of a worldview or a philosophy, a way that you look at things. That if enough sad things happen to us, we start to wonder if there's anything worth wondering about anymore. And in my experience with the center, it usually takes about 15 to 20 minutes before you're like, oh. And I mean, like, in the face of trauma, you know, like, I hope it doesn't sound like I'm diminishing that. I think I'm experiencing something stronger. And even, you know, it's not like a radical change, turn around, I'm healed. But, oh yeah, like, oh my gosh, that moment of your mouth kind of drops open and you feel giddy or you giggle or you're just shocked, like, what? That can't be. About the world, you know, the number of things, the kinds of things, the amount of new things to learn is inexhaustible and growing. And so that curiosity posture is not only probable, it's like, it's undoubted, like for adults, I mean, of any age. It just takes some reminding and some nurturing to think about to see the world that way again. And then divergent thinking, you know, thinking outside the box or multiple solutions to a problem, that's just a muscle. That the first, curiosity is a posture or a way to look at the world, but divergent thinking is a muscle. And so again, the question is, well, do you lose that muscle, sort of like a salamander's tail, you know, as you turn 18 and your divergent thinking muscle just falls, you know, you like burp it out or something. No, it's not true. It sits right here in the front of your brain. We know where it is. And as you and I have done, like, start working it. And sure, it's atrophied. It's very weak. But what kind of gospel level good news is it that it's there? Your creator gave it to you because you're going to need it to find and cultivate and explore and unlock all the hidden potential in this ridiculous, unnecessarily good world of ours, world without end. We're going to need that muscle. So curiosity, divergent thinking, and the third one, that freedom to fail, is sort of like a culture almost that gets created in yourself or in your workplace, where just taking risks is okay and guessing is celebrated, and getting more honest about ignorance. You know, like, if we just could talk openly for a minute about what we don't know, instead of in a meeting where it seems like everybody but me knows what the answer here is. And, you know, just, I think a freedom to fail in a workplace or in a family or within your own head and heart, it becomes the best way to operate. Towards what end? I mean, I think it is, if the period here was kind of full stop, this is just kind of a fun, delightful, personally enjoyable way to live, that'd be great. It'd be great. But lining up perfectly with the beginning of the creation story, that's okay. I mean, that'd be good. But we got to get more comfortable with, no, 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 it's forceful, unnecessary, accessible. So it turns out also, if you get the beginning right in that story, it says towards the end of that first chapter that human beings are supposed to cultivate this place, cultivate a place that is chocker box full of unknown hidden goodness. And what does that mean? Well, you have to go exploring. It's commanded. Thus saith the Lord, go play and explore and unlock the hidden goodness with which I filled the cosmos to the glory of God and the flourishing of humans everywhere, world without end. And that was sort of those two things in tandem kind of sealed my full collapse of quitting the job and starting this, whatever that was going to mean. And meeting wonderful people like you and finding kindred spirits. And I won't lie, I mean, there was absolutely, is this real? Is this okay? Does this hold water? And I think every time it keeps getting affirmed in all kinds of contexts, I go a little bit more crazy. Or I become a little bit more, we become a little bit more normal.
So powerful. Could you share just some things you've seen over the years as you've worked with people, stories or ahas, or I know you have like the best crazy did you know facts. Anything that you've just seen as people kind of build this muscle in their brain or, um, yeah, kind of capture this goodness.
Yeah, do you mean, or what would be more helpful, sort of testimonies of people, or those kind of did you knows about the creation, just crazy
Yeah, I'd love to hear some
tidbits?
testimony stories, and then maybe we can do some did you knows at the end.
Yeah, let's see. Well, so just I guess generally, people have come through the center as individuals that are in the fields of education and architecture and education and medicine and chemistry and sport and business and zoological societies and environmental studies and pastors and so in one sense, there it is, right? The multifaceted, complex, exponential goodness of the creation in culture leads to all this kind of work, all this kind of stuff to play with and explore. And so an entry level sort of testimony is that there are people in all those spheres of creation who fairly consistently are backing up or affirming this theology or this perspective. Like, guess what I found out today? And then they tell me, and I have no idea what they mean. And there it is again. Like, wow, And so just that it's not only possible, it backs up. Like it holds in the culture. Am I saying that right? Like, in other words, if people would, go to like a pretty in-depth business school and find in a couple hours, like this is kind of lame and it doesn't really actually hold up and the world operates a different way than this way, that would be tragic and hard, but I would need to deal with that and move on. But the opposite is happening, that across all those spheres. So you want some interesting conversation, like a person who works with rhinoceroses, multiple rhinoceros, and finding out species that they get along with, that the whole world thought they would kill each other if they were in the same habitat. There's a zoo in a certain part of the country that was the first to put these two animals together, and there was this moment of like, I hope they don't shred each other, and flourishing, like they love each other.
Wow.
And what that means for like the grass and the plants and the tree and the literal creation becoming what it's supposed to be. mind-blowing. I had one, I slipped my mind. The, teachers educating children, curiosity driven and curiosity based rather than a single answer is the goal, right? Or what are all the multiple ways to get to mastery of a subject? And I mastery in air quotes, because these educators have been so great in helping us think about, no, you need to think a little better about expert. What is an expert? Like a master's or a PhD or a multi-doctorate. They know everything there is to know about the time-space continuum. No, that's not true. And the best teachers are the ones who say, I have no idea what I'm bumping up against, and isn't this fascinating, right? Those are your best teachers.
Yeah.
And the kids come alive when the teacher is a little bit scared, right? And how different that is, in thinking about an expert. Mastery means comfort with ignorance and mystery and going deeper, and an expert, this charade of knowing it all. It's a matter of time before your job is over. Like, it's just not going to happen. Maybe, I don't know why I'm thinking of this, but I remember a story of, there was somebody at a party. There was somebody at a party that was doing something in like a doctorate grad school level study, for another degree or something. And everybody else about or at this party thinking about this person were pretty sure that she was doing something with time travel. And no one was like, they were all kind of weirded out about like, what? No way, this is not, come on. And it kind of it was a joke, and then it was a serious joke, and then there was like, gossip circles, and it just kind of was elevating, and somebody, I don't know, drew the short straw or whatever and asked her about it at this party, and she's at like the dip line or the punch table or something, and they're like, come on, like, just tell, because she kept saying, I can't tell you. Like, what are you doing? What are you working on? I can't tell you. And that just made it worse, like, what is going on? So they it was joking, but there was some oomph behind the conversation. They're like, come on, it's not like you're working on time travel or anything. And everybody there testified that she went instantly beet red, embarrassed. She put down her punch and she like fled the party.
Wow.
So, and then she admitted later, like, don't tell anybody. So I think, well, that's a great question, isn't it? Is that okay? Is that frivolous? There's people that are hungry today. Should we be working on time travel? Well, if you get the beginning right, our Creator has made a creation that is so full of potential and goodness that everybody can have enough to eat. And when everybody is well taken care of and flourishing and engaged and understanding the meaning of the human work that the Creator gave them to do, it's not only okay, it would be inappropriate to leave things like time travel untouched. It's not only okay, it's mandated.
Yeah. As you're talking, there's a verse about all of creation groans for the sons and daughters to be revealed. And I
Yes.
really do believe like God puts these passions, like you can even see little kids, they're like, you can see the kids that are going to be fascinated by science or math and the ones that are artistic, and like it's in our makeup. And as we grow, we get to explore, what those things are. And then certain people have passions for different things and create solutions for different things, and it's amazing. It's like in our DNA, in our makeup. So
Yes.
I think you're right. Like some people are eradicating hunger, and some people are looking into time travel or rocket ships or whatever it might be. But it's all like so beautiful, and
Yes.
wow, I love that.
Particularly too, the kind of pain, right? The groaning again, before the Center for Play and Exploration, I was like, that's a sinful, unrighteous, unjust groaning caused by my sin. And it's not. Paul says it's childbirth. It's labor. Just there it is again, that the creation is so full of life. And I mean, the next thing, if that's true about the childbirth, then you and I are the midwives.
Yes.
That the creation is waiting for, it's got all this goodness to show us. But precisely because God is so good, is such a good parent, rather than just kind of set it down in front of us, it's qualitatively and quantitatively better. It's more good for the children to have a role in this, a real role, that your work done as you, Lauren, in freedom and love and willing service, you're gonna actually unlock and create good in the world that would not be here with us if you didn't do it, and God stands by that, right? That's a whole nother room of goodness. What? Like, wouldn't it be easier if you just kind of like, yeah, but I'm good, and I'm unnecessarily good, and then you think about it for a second, you're like, that's a better parent. I'm going to actually help you, my child, become good yourself. It's actually yours. And you can develop it and work on it with real risk and real reward. And it will be hard for you. But then you also become good. It's just got us at every turn, just the hidden nature of the goodness, for another big problem I had with that, of like, well, that seems coy or elusive or cruel, and then just the delight of it, you mean like it's okay to explore and find things, and if you don't find them, they will stay hidden? It's like, yeah, that's right. Because I love it when I love giving these gifts to them. And it's better for me, thus saith the Lord. It's just wild, and how that lines up with what we were talking about before, this idea of human work being an act of play and exploration. And that seems, at first blush, naive and frivolous and unhelpful. And I think the main reason it feels that way to us is because we miss the beginning. That the most important thing about us is how depraved we are and how sinful we are. And we can't be trusted with stuff like that. I mean, just look what we do. And we have a better parent than we thought we had, and who made us good. And we will be good again. And so will this whole place, the whole thing. Is there even such a thing as something that's totally evil? I can't think of it. This has eradicated that possibility from my mind. All that there is God's good creation. I mean, you want to tease, like, for people listening, what about Satan? What is Satan? Or where did he come from, and what will he be? Goodness at this level and at this scale, I guess, is a warning to your listeners, a warning with a wink and a twinkle and a nudge. It changes how you think about the world. It changes how you think about evil. It changes how you think about salvation. It changes how you think about parenting and teaching. the Bible, I mean, I guess I want folks to know, like, this is, if this is even somewhat true, I mean, this might be the most important, weighty thing that we do, or that we think about, messing around with this question, goodness. How good is it really? And what does that mean? And then sort of holding on. But again, I would say the only way you can keep going through any kind of exploration into those weighty topics is at some very real level, if it's true at the end of the day that goodness has you. Like, you cannot fall off. You can't go somewhere where God is like, well, I'm sorry. There's nowhere that I could go today that is not my Creator's. That's kind of wild. And the evil that I would find there, and the pain and the toil and the suffering that I would find there, rather than being so scared that I don't go, I wonder if creeping in slowly, wondering what goodness will be when this place is recalled to life, when it is redeemed and every person here is who they were made to be again, what will that look like? And if that's even partly true, I can start working towards that today. And if that's true, it will start to meet me, and I'll start to see it happen, rather than it was never true and it'll just fall apart in a matter of minutes. I really mean it, that this idea of goodness, it goes to the very beginning and it goes to the very bottom and the core. And I guess one of the work or missions of the center is just to ask people to engage that, and to give it the time, to give it the attention, to give yourself to that and see what happens. And I will be the first to say that's risky and it feels a little unnerving. But if it's true, wow.
That's so beautiful. Is there a way listeners could just start to explore or cultivate this, or like a step that they could take into this? And I know
Yeah,
you do a lot in the center, but like,
yeah,
yeah.
for sure. Yeah, just on our own, in our individual selves, or things people want to try. I mean, a very practical thing is, if there's something that you've always been curious about or wondered about, but you haven't kind of let yourself have the permission to, it's frivolous or doesn't solve any big problem or anything, I would just, encourage folks to take the next step and Google it. Do a search, like, what is the color blue? And why do I see blue? Or I say that because I know that one or two questions in, like, you've fallen into the creation. You ask a question about a color, and in a couple of minutes you're talking about light spectrum and rods and cones in your eyes and reflectivity, and you're off and running. If you take the next step, like ask a question. And I realize in saying that a lot of folks that I've worked with have trouble even identifying something that they're curious about. That it's been that long since they kind of they've just really convinced themselves that it is completely frivolous and unnecessary and unhelpful. Sorry, not unnecessary, it's unhelpful. Who cares? Who cares about the speed of light and time travel, or who cares about how does something become wet? Like, what's really happening there? Why is my coat wet when water hits it? Why doesn't it bounce up? Like, what does that have to do with anything important, right? That's what we say. So if people literally are like, I can't think of one thing that I'm curious about, then have a friend or a neighbor give you one. You know,
Mm.
share theirs with you. You know, or search that, right? What are things to be curious about? You can throw a rock into this, and wherever it lands, just go see, pick it up. It's just literally true. There's nowhere you can go that it's not happening. That the goodness is not exponential, hidden, and multiplying. It's everywhere. If you have a physical dictionary or encyclopedia in your home, just let it fall open and look somewhere else and put your finger down in it. I just remember when that happened for me with Beatles, you know, and 15 years later, it's ridiculous. Like I promise, it'll just start, and then take the next little step and the next little one. Cultivate curiosity about something, and pay attention to what happens, and talk to somebody about it, or keep going. And it's that kind of world, and it'll hold you. It'll hold you. It's good.
So good. I'd love to, just before we end, touch on shame. We had a session last time, and you talked about how that is actually, I believe you said, like a muscle that can be shifted, or like we could cultivate different neuroplasticity. Um, but that kind of is what causes the fear of failure. And as we strengthen the shame muscle,
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
can really shift things for us. Could you share a little bit about that too?
yeah. The quick word or mechanism of divergent thinking, fascinatingly, is that it's not an on switch. You know, that muscle that we were talking about, the divergent thinking muscle, when people work this muscle out and are just in great shape and have kind of ripped divergent thinking muscles, they're not actually, it turns out, turning on creativity. It turns out that God did that from the beginning, that we are these fountains always on of ideas and insights and wisdom and questions. You don't have to really nurture that, but what you do have to do is turn down shame, or to turn down embarrassment or being wrong, the fear of being wrong, or being embarrassed about. So whatever form that takes, that's what that muscle. So divergent thinking exercises are turning off shame, and you can do that in very practical ways. Essentially, just getting more and more comfortable with guessing or being literally wrong. That's the wrong answer, and kind of looking around and like, oh, I did okay. I survived that. Let's fail again. You know, that's the muscle, and that's on paper. And then I think people will kind of start to realize here, experientially, you know, it is a paralysis. Like fear of failure and embarrassment can be so powerful that it literally, in this case, it literally dams up or creates paralysis for thinking of multiple solutions, you know, and I think people know that intuitively. We've all experienced it. And I guess I'd say quickly too, it certainly can and does look like things like improv, and I think they have really latched on to that well, but that's a very narrow slice of the creation. And to say that the only way to do that, that kind of short circuits and contradicts the whole play and exploration idea. There are literally countless ways to get better a little bit at a time, just in your own dome. Start in your own head and heart, because that's where that voice lives usually, and grow from there to getting more comfortable. I mean, you and I started doing this in the last time. Wasn't it remarkable to become aware of the way your own thoughts and your own head is saying, you're an idiot. That's a bad idea. That'll never work. They're not going to think that's cool. And that's just in your own head, wherever that is. So
Yeah.
growing from that out to you and I doing that together out loud. I'm going to fail in front of Lauren, and then into 3 or 4 people, and then you can kind of see dot 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 when you're in work at work, whatever, I use that term loosely to mean that group of people now where your reputation is on the line.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a boss that, real or imagined, has power over you, and they may be the most playful and exploring person ever, but you are afraid of failing in front of them. So can you imagine with me for just a second of if rooms of adults trying to solve problems in the creation were more curious, had strong, toned, divergent thinking muscles, and were comfortable guessing and being wrong in front of each other. Well, we don't have to guess. We know what that's going to look like. The new heavens and the new earth.
Yeah.
All as it should be.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. Uh, if people wanted to get connected to the Center for Play and Exploration, how would they do that?
Easiest way is the website, all typed out, playandexploration.com. There's no ampersand or plus, it's AND, playandexploration.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Dave. Any last words of wisdom, fun facts, anything you want to share with our listeners before we close?
Um, time travel is just a matter of how fast you go. So if you go fast enough, we just haven't figured out how to go quite fast enough yet. When you start going a certain speed or beyond, days and nights start to get interesting. So it's a done deal. It's just a matter of being able to safely go that fast. You know, if you're going faster than the sunrise, for example, is it today or is it yesterday? And that's kind of what's happening. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that
Yeah.
fascinating?
Yes.
Or that a clock up in a jet, 20,000 feet up in the air going Mach 2, and a clock on your wristwatch. When the pilot comes back down, the clocks are a little different. It's like, well, what do you mean? Apparently it has something to do with speed.
Wow. Oh, it's so fun.
It
It's
is.
amazing how much, even now, compared to 100 years, like what has been created and invented. And it's like, yeah, just the beginning. It's just the beginning. Oh, Dave, thank you so much. I feel inspired. I hope our listeners feel inspired. And just thank you for your yes to kind of take a risk to shift your whole career into this and to awaken hearts and minds and, um, yeah, invite people into deeper purpose. And it's amazing.
Well, thank you. I'm so glad it crossed our paths, and thanks for inviting me and sharing this story.
Thanks so much, Dave.